Hello everyone, and welcome to Sunup. I'm Lyndall Stout. Oklahomans can certainly empathize with people in California and other states battling wildfires right now. Here at home, thanks to rain and continued green conditions, there are steps that landowners can take right now to help lower their risk of wildfires this winter. Sunup's Curtis Hare catches up with our Extension fire ecologist, John Weir.
How you doing, John?
Just fine. How are you doing?
Doing good.
Good.
So why don't you tell us a little bit what you guys got going on today?
Oh, we got a little growing season fire going on.
Man, you know, you wouldn't think of something this green that would burn this well.
That's right. You know, a lot of people, that's their picture of summertime, growing season, green grass. It just won't burn. But as you can see right here, we've got it burning really well on that. We've been doing a lot of growing season burning.
So talk a little bit about the benefits of burning this time of year.
Well, you know, the benefits of burning this time of year is pretty much the same kind of benefits that we see burning in the dormant season or any time of the year. You can see increased cattle gains, increased plant palatability, increased crude protein on plant species. Again, wildfire reduction risk and stuff. We're removing fuel, so for future wildfires, we don't have those big problems and things like that going on.
Is it easier to kind of manage this time of year?
It is. As you can see, you know, the flames are, you know, the fire's not moving real fast. You know, we just lit that just a little bit ago and it's only traveled, you know, about 15 feet. Whereas if this would have been March or April, man, it had already been, you know, 100 yards down the way real quick. Flames are a lot shorter because, again, that green grass in there changes that whole aspect of the way that fire behaves, because it's the old growth, it's the old mulch from previous years that starts the fire. Then it burns and heats up, boils all the water out of the green grass, and then the green grass will go ahead and burn within that. And so as you can see, it just slows that down because it takes so much energy out of that fire to boil all that water out of it.
Yeah, because like, you know, wildfire is a naturally occurring event, and this just helps to manage that. You know,
That's
it's
right.
good for the land, but you want to just keep it in control, not get out of control.
That's right. And that's one of the great benefits of this time of year is the safety aspect. It's a whole lot safer to do, a whole lot easier to maintain and control. Spot fire reductions, you know, embers blowing out. Again, a lot of times they land in a lot of green stuff, so the risk of spot fires, it's always there, but it's a whole lot less this time of year. And then two, even if we do have a spot, it's real simple. It's not moving real fast. We can get over there, put it out, not much problem.
And the weather conditions here are pretty favorable for it, correct? I mean, it's pretty cool out right now.
Yeah, we actually got to hit a really good day today. Typically it's, you know, it's sunny and it's already hot and we're dealing with fire out here. That's one of the bad things. But today it's a nice mild day for summer in August here in Oklahoma. So that makes it nice to be able to do that. That's one of the things you got to watch out for too, burning this time of year, is just the heat, the stress and stuff on the crew. Not, you know, out here working when it's, you know, 100 plus degrees outside a lot of times, and it's even more than that when you're near the fire. So we try to make sure everybody rides, everybody stays hydrated, switch out tasks so you don't get nobody overheated and don't get anybody hurt.
And you do have some resources out there for people who are considering burning during the summer, how to pick the right weather conditions and what to do, right?
Yes, we do.
All right, thanks, John. If you'd like a link to that, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Welcome to the weekly Mesonet Weather Report. August has started off with a similar pattern to last year, with mild temperatures and wetter than normal conditions over much of the state. Wednesday's cool front brought some much-needed rain to a diagonal swath of central Oklahoma. Our newest station at Yukon received the highest amount at 2.77 inches. However, the driest region of the state in southwest Oklahoma was not so fortunate. The cool front also brought some refreshing temperatures. This map shows the 24-hour temperature change from the afternoon of the 7th to the afternoon of the 8th. Bernieville shows a drop of 27 degrees. While these cool, fall-like temperatures feel great to us, they may become a problem for certain developing crops. The shaded blue area of this graph shows the average statewide temperature over the past 15 years for June, July, and August. The yellow line shows the average daily temperature for 2018. This indicates we have been below average since the latter part of July, and forecasts show it may stay that way for a while. Now here's Gary with a new drought monitor and more on the forecast situation.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, the rain and the cooler weather has certainly been wonderful. It does good things to drought. It actually gets rid of it in some cases. But before that rain, we still had increasing drought across the state of Oklahoma. So let's take a look at the drought monitor map and see what conditions were at that time. And I'll be darned if we didn't have D4 exceptional drought introduced once again into far southwestern Oklahoma. Those are areas that have been down 14 to 16 inches of rain since the beginning of the water year on October 1st, 2017. And with the heat that we've had during late spring into summer, it's just taken its toll. So now we have that big blob of maroon down in the far southwestern corner. So we're talking about places Harmon, Greer, Jackson, Tillman County, a little bit of Kiowa County. So that area, and that's of course surrounded by the red, which is extreme drought. So I'm just going to show you what we've seen in pictures. Now the first picture is a field from up in Noble County. This is southwest of our Red Rock Mesonet site. You can see that's a field that looks like winter up that way. Next is a farm pond from up that way, and that has a 5-foot shovel put into perspective how far down that pond it actually is, and you can see that pond is shrinking quite rapidly. Now let's travel down to far southwestern Jackson County. Another very poor looking field, looks like January. If there weren't some green trees in the area, you would think it's January, but unfortunately this was this week, so very poor conditions, looking like the 2011 through 2013 period down that way. So maybe next week we'll have some much better rainfall maps and maybe even some pictures to show you of improving drought conditions. Until then, this has been the Oklahoma Mesonet Weather Report. Thank you.
Oklahoma producers know moisture is essential to a successful crop and, of course, the bottom line. Today, Sunup videographer Ed Barron shows us ways to use water more efficiently.
We use several different types of irrigation methods on our farm here. We've had furrow irrigation since the 1950s. Due to water efficiency usage and other issues, we're looking at more efficient ways. And so over the years, we've adapted some overhead sprinkler or pivot. That doesn't always fit rectangular fields well. And we have also started adapting subsurface drip irrigation in the last decade, which shows a lot of promise in many areas.
When it comes to deciding about installing or purchasing a center pivot system versus a subsurface drip system, growers need to keep in mind all the requirements of a subsurface drip system. The initial cost is usually 2 to 3 times larger than a center pivot systems on an acre basis. But at the same time, subsurface drip systems are assumed to be more efficient than pivot systems.
As we've switched over to these other forms of irrigation, it's presented both challenges and opportunities. Our preferred method of irrigation is definitely drip irrigation, but it does have a lot of challenges and it's very expensive. We spent a lot of money in the pivot. The pivot worked fine for 7-8 years. We switched over this past year and put subsurface drip irrigation in. We had to lose some land that was in pasture, but we gained back our corners. Our acreage increased slightly, acres covered. Water usage is very similar, but we got rid of all the surface erosion in the pivot tracks. So pivot irrigation has its benefits, but so does subsurface drip irrigation. They both have trade-offs.
The subsurface drip system requires a significant filtration unit to ensure that we remove all the suspended material out of the water. It also requires maintenance as far as biological growth, because you could have biological growth and also some sedimentation in the tubes, and that needs to be taken care of by flushing and by also injecting acid. So these are some of the things that growers need to keep in mind when thinking about subsurface drip irrigation, And that's one of the reasons that the initial cost is larger, because we need that filtration system.
So we collect all our water to one point, filter it, treat it, add nutrition if we're going to, and then send it back out to the different zones across all the fields.
In some areas, there could be significant damage from rodents to subsurface drip systems. There are some products out there that have some chemicals embedded in them that manufacturers claim that would deter rodents, but it's something to keep in mind, because they may not be 100% successful under variable conditions.
I spend a lot of money on gopher bait, and then digging up leaks and patching them and repairing them. It's nice and manageable, but it takes a lot of management and labor to keep the system maintained and operating at efficient levels.
With the subsurface drip, as we mentioned, it's got a higher initial cost, so that's something to keep in mind. But if the system is to be operated over a long time, like longer than 15 years, it can easily pay for itself and be more profitable than a center pivot system if it's maintained and used.
I think if you're looking at making a decision between pivot and drip, you need to do a lot of homework. Go talk to some farmers that actually have hands-on experience and be ready to take a lot of notes based on what they've experienced or they've learned with those two different systems.
Beef demand is still holding strong. So Daryl, what's driving this demand?
Well, I think there's a number of factors going on. You know, sometimes we really just have to acknowledge that preferences are strong right now, and we don't usually know that until after the fact. But when you look at the more economic signals, if you will, I think there's broad-based, demand support from the macroeconomy. Unemployment's low. More people are working, so that's good. I think a big part of it has to be the fact that our trade picture has been very supportive this year in terms of beef exports.
Well, speaking of trade, there was some new trade data released. Did it show anything interesting with what's going on there?
You know, the trade data continues to be very supportive, not only for beef, but across the board. So for the month of June, which is the latest data, beef, pork, and broiler exports were all up. If we look at, for the year to date, beef exports are up nearly 15%. On top of this, a little bit more than 15% for the month of June. And we're up to, almost all of our major markets. In the current month, we're up to Japan, Korea, Mexico, Canada. We were a little bit down in Hong Kong, but we're up for the year to date to all of those markets. So beef continues very strong. Again, pork looks pretty good. As well. We're looking at record meat production in the U.S., beef, pork, and poultry. And so that's going to be, it's going to be a challenge to work through that meat, and these trade numbers are very supportive of that.
So we're always talking about the trade disruption lately. How might that impact producers going forward?
Well, again, lots of things can happen. In terms of the beef industry or beef market specifically, direct impacts, of course, could happen, although beef has been relatively sheltered from most of the actual tariffs and so on. We do have tariffs on beef to China right now, but we're not exporting very much to China. However, in the month of June, we did see a decrease from the previous 2 months, so that may be indicative of those tariff impacts. The bigger potential impact on beef markets specifically is if we do disrupt trade, particularly for pork, then we're going to see an increase in supplies in the domestic market, and that's going to put further pressure because of this record level of production we're seeing in the U.S. market. So the other thing that could happen is we begin to see higher prices on a wide assortment of goods, and at some point that may very well impact consumer spending in a general sense. Beef is pretty vulnerable whenever consumers see any sort of squeeze in discretionary income.
All right, thanks, Daryl. Daryl Peel, Livestock Marketing Specialist at Oklahoma State University.
As we approach the mid part of August, that means that we're just a few days away from the start of the fall calving season for those herds here in the Southwest that do plan to start that calving around the 1st of September each year. A couple of reminders I think are very, very important that we bring to you each time this year. The first one is, of course, of the research done here at Oklahoma State University that has illustrated to us that the average gestation length of cows that are pregnant during the hot summer months the average gestation length is about 5 days shorter than what we might see with spring calving cows. And therefore, if we have scheduled our breeding program last fall such that we expect the first calves to begin around the 1st of September, we know that there's always variation around that gestation length. In the books, you'll see it to be about 283 days. In any situation, there will be quite a little variation around that. Well, if we shorten that to about 278 days, now we can certainly have some calves that are coming around the 20th of August or shortly thereafter. That tells me we want to start looking for problems that might be taking place with a replacement heifer that's going through the first throes of labor, and we need to give her assistance. Also, this is a good time of year to go ahead and get that calving kit put together so that it's ready to go for this upcoming fall calving season. I'd like to put in my calving kit and start out with a 5-gallon stainless steel bucket or a plastic bucket, something that I can always clean and get disinfected in between each use. And of course, remember to put in the calf pulling chains, make sure there's handles to go with those. You'll also want to have some kind of a non-irritating antiseptic, as well as a non-detergent dish soap for a lubricant can be really helpful as well. Make sure that you've got some plastic OB sleeves available in that calving kit ready to go. Don't forget some of the simple things such as having a flashlight if you need to do some nighttime checks and some extra batteries. Also, when that baby calf arrives, you probably want to have a bottle of about 7% tincture of iodine to dip the navel in to treat the navel area so that infection doesn't get into that baby calf from that particular region. We need to think ahead that this upcoming fall calving season is really closer than we might believe. Making these preparations is certainly going to be important and helpful when we get in that situation in the middle of the night here in this calving season and we have to help a heifer or a cow that's having some problems. We look forward to visiting with you again next week on Sunup's Cow-Calf Corner.
There really hasn't been much movement in the market this week. And Kim, what's making the market chatter?
Well, of course, the WASDE report that's going to be released on Friday, but the big chatter's about lower wheat production. Russia, their wheat production may be down 20%, their quality not as good as it has been in the past. Ukraine, there's kind of difference of opinion on how much lower Ukraine's going. I think it might be slightly lower than that. You've got the European Union, especially Germany, France, 20% lower production there, and Australia. You know, there's right between the lines that their crop's been devastated with dry weather. So that's the big word. At the end of in the middle of the week, I read an article that there's a shortage of feed wheat. Feed wheat prices. Korea bought wheat for around $5.70 with cost and freight. In other words, delivered. Within a week or a week and a half, that had increased almost $1. And so there's maybe a shortage of feed wheat around the world. And then, of course, you've got corn and soybeans. The debate is what's the yield there? It's going to be high. It's just how high is it going to be?
What does lower production mean for the overall world crop and then also prices on there?
Well, if you look at wheat, that lower production is basically what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. We've seen that dollar increase in prices. I think the market took a breather this week to wait and see just how things are coming out. And it's probably that the market's already got Russia, Ukraine, the European Union lower production in it. Australia, I think, is the key to our next dollar move. If Australia continues to decline, I think our prices can go higher.
Producers across the state, across the U.S. are penciling out next year's crop. Some of this wheat's going to be going in the ground soon. What do you see in the patented Kim Anderson crystal ball for wheat prices at harvest in 2019? Well,
outside the crystal ball, if you'll look at what elevators will forward contract 2019 harvested wheat for, right at $6, just below $6 right now. So the question is will it get higher? Then, of course, with the relatively large corn harvest coming on, with relatively large bean harvest and relatively low corn and bean prices, how do those prices compare? And I think wheat is going to look relatively well for the 19 crop year.
Okay, thank you much, Kim Anderson, Grain Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University. And now here's Brian Arnell with some apps that could be useful to ag producers.
I want to talk about some mobile applications that will be useful this time of year as we're starting to prep for harvest on our summer crops and also get ready for planting of winter crops and some hunting season stuff. So one of the first apps I'd like to talk about today is the Ag PhD's Harvest app. Now, the Ag PhD put an app together called Harvest Loss. It's a very useful and simple tool that can help you know how important it is to set your combine. So what you do, we go into, say, corn, you look at how many seeds there are per pound. You can adjust that. In this app, it starts out as 1,450 seeds per pound. And then you go out behind the combine after the combine's run through the field or made that first pass, you count how many seeds you find on the ground per square foot. So in this case, I'm gonna say we go in there and we find 10 kernels in a 1 foot square. You can also go in there and put a cost per bushel or crop price per bushel. Let's just say $3.50 for the time being. And it goes through the calculations. 10 kernels per square foot is approximately 5.36 bushels per acre and a cost of $3.50 per bushel. So this just lets you know how much you're losing by that combine not being set properly. We have a couple grazing apps that are going to be handy this time of year, especially as we're dealing with the drought across the state. One of those apps is the the Oklahoma State's Graze OK app. It uses a grazing stick to measure the height of your forage to see how much forage you have and how much you can graze on it, and give you kind of an estimation of forage load or stocking rate. Another handy one right now as we're going through a drought across a great part of the state is a cattle management app. And this is basically a flow-through chart on what to do, a decision tree on what to do when you're having limited grazing due to drought. So it'll go and it'll ask you about your feed supply. It'll ask you about your herd. It'll ask you about your facilities and your herd health. And it'll help you decide whether you keep, whether you sell, whether you feed, or whether you can graze. So it's just a decision aid to help you process through during the challenging times of trying to have a cattle operation during a drought. That's just a few of the apps that are popular with ag producers right now. To see a full list, check out the Sunup website at www.sunup.okstate.edu.
Finally today, real-life lessons on poverty. So decision makers and leaders in one community have better ideas on what it might take to address it. Sunup's Curtis Hare takes us to Comanche County.
But in order for me to cash this check for you, we're going to have to take care of that loan balance, $225.
It's important that we understand that poverty affects all of us.
In the annex building at the Comanche County Fairgrounds, a unique experiment is giving elected officials, social service workers, and members of Extension a glimpse into what families with limited resources face every day.
The simulation isn't about families living in deep, limited resources, but right at that poverty edge. Simulation gives community leaders, our agency representatives that are helping limited resource families on a daily basis, is to help them experience what those families are actually going through day by day.
Okay, so I'll need $14.
Participants are split up into small groups, or families, and given specific storylines. Whether they're playing a parent or a 10-year-old, they're expected to take the simulation and their roles seriously.
When you go to the store, can you give me $5 worth of treats?
The simulation is split up into 4 15-minute sessions. Each session represents 1 week.
They have a number of tasks that they have to perform, like everyday tasks like paying bills, going to school, going to work, and their job is to make those decisions given the limited resources that they have.
The participants have different resource tables that they can go to and access services from. Some are kind of the necessities, like a supermarket for their food. There's the mortgage company that they have to pay rent.
Deborah Johnson works as the Poverty Initiatives Coordinator with the Salvation Army in Comanche County. The nonprofit partnered with OSU Extension to put on the simulation, and she says these tasks help break down common stigmas and misconceptions.
You know, the phrase pull yourself up by your bootstraps, or, you know, why aren't they working harder comes to mind. It's really all about your resources. So we look in some more rural areas, their resources, even food resources, are so much more limited. There may be a gas station in the neighborhood and a liquor store, so how are they going to provide a nutritious meal for their family?
We all make choices with our finances, with our resources, and many times limited resource families are given the choice as to whether or not they buy groceries or they pay their mortgage. And if they choose to feed their families and not pay the mortgage, many times they'll lose their homes.
Which are situations participants will face today.
This really reinforced that there are real obstacles for our community that is living in poverty still.
Playing a 9-year-old autistic child in the simulation, Audrey Howard says there's one constant issue nearly all families dealt with.
Honestly, that transportation was the biggest problem that a lot of people had, especially our family too, because one, transportation was costly, and two, it wasn't easy to come by. If you had to go to social services, that took money to be able to get there. If you needed to go to work, again, you had to have money to be able to get to work.
According to the Center for Poverty Research, the national poverty rate is 14%. In some Oklahoma counties, the situation is even worse.
Comanche County actually is 16.8%, so we're even higher than that national rate. So many times the situation is generational versus situational. When someone comes to poverty from a situational perspective, they have been raised typically with the skills and understanding to overcome whatever obstacle or situation they've encountered. But when it's generational, which is often the case in Oklahoma, they've not been taught those skills.
And we in Extension have a duty to help our communities realize what those families are facing. People that are struggling with their finances, struggling with providing food for their family. That is impactful on the agriculture business as well, because folks are not able to purchase their products.
In Comanche County, I'm Curtis Hare.
That'll do it for us this time. Sunup will be taking a break for the next couple of weeks for August Fest programming on OETA. We'll be back with our regular broadcast on September 1st. Meantime, you can still stay informed. We'll be live streaming interviews with state specialists on our Facebook and YouTube channels. Send us your questions now via social media or tune in and ask them live. Until then, I'm Lyndall Stout. Remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.